Back in my time, a game would sell if it was good because word of mouth would carry it. You see, I never got to see a trailer for Baldur's Gate. It was just recommended to me by a friend, and after I played it and enjoyed it, I recommended it to other people. Nowadays, that would still be true, except most corporations who lack the creativity or the potential to make a good game, they have to resort to other tactics. And I firmly believe that once a corporation becomes desperate enough, and this money usually goes to shills, whether it is streamers that are paid to like the game, or journalists which are being wined and dined and usually flown across the country in order to get their first hands on one of these games, or just basic bitch woke politics. You see, the reason for woke politics is that if you create a game that the people in California now who do video game journalism like, then they will promote that game and everyone is going to talk about it. Case in point, we are going to look at Capcom. Now, recently Capcom has gotten hacked, and besides some of the future IPs that they're talking about, some of the mindset, some of the marketing that they have planned has been exposed. All of this information is already made public. I am taking it from mainstream journalist sources, and if Capcom is going to DMCA this video for it, I will just fight it because I know I'm in the right and this is entirely fair use. But I want to show you how corporations now view community building. You see, it's not an organic thing, and the way they do it is just simply paying off streamers. Now, if you were to say that a streamer has been bought by a corporation, this would be considered a conspiracy theory in internet slang. But just because you label something as a conspiracy theory doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And at the end of the day, there is nothing to conspire. Purchasing good press is a practice that has been done for years, and I don't see why a corporation that spends millions of dollars on marketing wouldn't do it today. So they seem to encounter a problem as they look at the game Apex Legends. They say that the most straightforward approach to community building is to hire a popular streamer, have them play the game on their stream, or to get the attention of their viewers. However, there are things to keep in mind when hiring streamers. Hiring a top-level streamer to play the game at the release has a great initial benefit and also has a huge amount of attention it is drawn to the gameplay. However, there are downsides. Apparently, when Ninja finished its contract with Apex Legends, he has stopped playing it. Because the game had a couple of hiccups in the future, it caused the game service to drastically lose the momentum it has built up. Now it makes a lot of sense. I personally didn't understand why Apex Legends became so popular and why the drop in popularity also just disappeared overnight. Apex Legends wasn't, in my opinion, a great game, but it wasn't a bad game either. It was something along lines of mediocrity. And as the game started losing more and more popularity, the company became desperate and it made the game more and more woke. It has gotten to the point where one character was called as they, them in the game, and people who would not use the correct pronouns for a fictional character would get banned from the forums. In other words, actual paying customers would be banned from forums because they do not have the correct politics. Now, I don't know any type of business where simply telling your customers and the people who are interested in your product that they are not welcome is a good thing. But Capcom seems to have a different take on how to improve the shilling. You see, instead of hiring someone like Ninja, which is probably god-awfully expensive, they decided to hire mid-team streamers that they are going to call ambassadors. And ambassadors are going to follow from different regions such as the US, Europe, Japan, and Asia. And these ambassadors are going to have specific perks that apparently are going to be maintained once the contract expires. In other words, they do not want these ambassadors to stop shilling their game once the contract has finished. Now you can see why this is very disingenuous for the consumer. The consumer who follows a specific streamer would genuinely believe that, well, this game is now popular and people actually enjoy playing it. when in reality, the person who accepts this contract is going to have to pretend that they enjoy it, and most likely they will not have to disclose the contract, just like Ninja didn't have to disclose that he was paid by EA in order to play Apex Legends. It was something that was found out after the whole situation took place. Another way that they try to make games more streamer friendly as well as more video game journalist friendly is to include a way where the games just play themselves. You see, if a streamer dies often to a specific event and can't pass that encounter, they are more likely to drop the game, as well as certain video game journalists. And you will notice that more games, such as the sequel for Amnesia, literally cannot be failed when you play them. The game just plays itself if you just press the forward arrows, very similar to the Gone Home walking simulator. And here you have an idea for a game like Catherine Full Body, where the character will climb up the right puzzle route automatically. You will be able to enjoy the game with few stress, since you can leave the difficulty part to the autoplay and turn on off the settings whenever you would like to. Now, this in itself is not something necessarily bad. If a person wants to play the game in a very easy mode and an easy setting, I have nothing against it. It's just very funny that they are very attentive to what the game journalists demand rather than to what the actual consumer demands, which is usually a game without bugs and that works on the first day of release. If possible, good gameplay and good story would also be required. But this finally brings up to the meat of the subject, the thing that I find absolutely hilarious. You see, if they were to actually listen to what the gamers want and they would go to any forum without moderation, they would see that this is definitely not it. In fact, most gamers are very upset when this is being pushed into their games, but the game journalists are the ones that are the most happy. Now, I want to point out that I'm very aware that all of this reads like a parody, and it's something that at first I considered to be satire. However, because I do know a couple of people in the AAA industry from different corporations, they tell me that these types of meetings are actually quite common. And while it does seem to be satire, it's actually not. Secondly, the fact that Capcom is actually DMCAing most of these videos that talk about these things leads me to assume that there is some truth to the matter. Especially the fact that Capcom did not come out and say that the information that is being presented is false. So one of the things they are very concerned with is the excessive sexuality and different exposure between men and women. And as you can see, Ryu, which is exposed naked, is okay. However, the fact that this attack from Rainbow Mika, which involves her using her buttocks in order to slam an opponent to the ground, this is hypersexualized and is not okay. Because of this, I am incredibly worried about the future of Street Fighter. You see, one of the things that drags me to play Street Fighter V, and I just can't bear myself to touch Mortal Kombat, is actually the fact that the characters look good. You see, in Mortal Kombat, the male characters look fine. And in fact, the way they managed to do Rambo and RoboCop, I would consider they did a lot of justice to these characters. But the women is not the fact that they are dressed all the way up like they are going to church that is the issue. The main issue is that these characters are devoid of femininity altogether. I can't think of a single feminine character from the entire Mortal Kombat cast, and I am fairly sure that this is done on purpose. They have actively managed to find out which are the things that are considered to be feminine tropes and have avoided them entirely as if it's the plague when it comes to creating their feminine characters. This, to me, as a consumer, puts me off. If you want to think that my politics are wrong on the matter, that's fine, but you're still not getting my money. Now, if you like this video, there's going to be a second part of it on my secondary channel. I have to shill my products one way or another. There's going to be a link into the description, and in the secondary video, we're going to look at what Capcom considers to be good things and bad things according to woke culture. We're going to look at what they consider that their developers are allowed to put in their games versus what their developers aren't. And you're going to be very disappointed into the changes that they are going to make. If they stick to these changes, I don't think I'm going to purchase much of their games anymore. Not necessarily as a political statement, but simply because I do not like the current way America does its video games. And Capcom, being a Japanese company, seems to try to emulate a lot of the American market. I personally like the originality and the creativity that Capcom used to bring to the table, but it seems that that might not be the case in the future. What I also find interesting is that when you look at the video game journalists and they give examples of what are good games and what are bad games, almost all the time the good games are going to be considered things that come from California or things that look as if they came from California, while the bad examples almost all the time are Japanese games. Just look at Anita Sarkeesian's criticism. Every single time she complained about the game, almost 70% was a Japanese game. So yeah, I mean, I really like Japan. I really like their culture, and I like the way they express themselves in the video gaming market. And if they're going to try to Americanize, I think I'm going to have to look to Polish developers as well as indie developers to give them my money. Let me know what you think, and I'll see you in the second part of this video on my secondary channel.